All right, we stay with international news and this particular story as well within the SADC region, but also looking at some international stories that have been making headlines. We have been talking about the U.S. here on the show, bringing you those very latest with regards to the developments and, the incidents that we then saw in New Orleans as well as Las Vegas. We do have our international news editor, Sophie Mokoena. Sophie, compliments of the season to you, and thank you so much for your time. You think about the U.S., that's where we start, and this is a country that's right now having to face some serious security issues, and this is ahead of the inauguration. Certainly, this does complicate the situation for them, given the fact that they may now need to further heighten security.
Yes, indeed, U.S. will have to work very hard to ensure that the security ahead of the inauguration. And it looks like Donald Trump is ready to go back to the White House and do the work, even though there are people who have issues in terms of how he has conducted himself in terms of appointments and pronouncements ahead of the inauguration. And he pointed out to those incidents that we saw, and investigations are still underway. And there is hope that perhaps the FBI and those who are making investigations will come up with a clear indication as to what this is all about. As you know, that there were people who were not happy about Trump winning elections, or is it just perhaps those incidents that we often see in countries where you have this issue of fundamentalists and people who are radical, who are doing things to express their views after they've been radicalized. So we are not clear in terms of what is happening, but I think very soon the report will be tabled and more information will come to light in terms of are there reasons to be concerned or panic ahead of the inauguration, or the U.S. will be able to address this issue.
And, when you speak about security issues, there's also security issues here with our neighbor in Mozambique, and that's where the opposition party for PODEMOS, that's Venancio Mondlane, who's calling for peace and unity, of course, is not in the country, but we've seen a new round of protests, and there's also talk that protesters may be regrouping. There's a lot of concern for the region as well. Let's speak about this particular story, because it doesn't seem to be a headache that's going to go away for this country anytime soon.
Yes, as you heard in that insert from our colleague from Tanzania, talking about President Hassan on her pronouncement in terms of the situation in Mozambique, as she is currently the chair of the organ, the Troika on Politics, Defense and Security. But for now, it looks like the issue of protests, they are not as heavy as they were in the past weeks or days. It looks like there's fatigue, but secondly, the leader being away, people are beginning to ask questions in terms of them putting their lives at risk and continuing with protests. On the other hand, you have business saying the distraction, it's not doing anyone a favor, as you had then Isaac Lucando talking about how IMF is likely going to revise the economic growth of Mozambique, and that will lead to high food prices. It has started already, and access to supply chain will be problematic. Now, I think this issue is getting even more hectic because there is no one right now who is willing to perhaps agree to the negotiations. You have government saying everything is under control. You have parties saying we don't accept the results. And therefore, on the eve of the inauguration, because this inauguration will come before the U.S. inauguration.
And when you then are looking at the situation in Mozambique, because now there's, some concern even from others who are saying that, while some of the opposition leaders may have been at the table with the outgoing president, it does seem to be, a complicated picture if you've got Venancio Mondlane, who is speaking to protesters, as you say, from outside the country. The other opposition party members, how are they reacting to everything that is currently happening in their country?
You know that they met the outgoing President Filipinos, and they did tell him that they'll come back with way forward or what they think must happen, but they continued to reject the results at that time. And now on Monday, they are going to make an announcement, main parties, in terms of where to from here. We will be speaking to them in the afternoon after the press conference to get a sense of where to from here, but also to get the reaction from the Mozambican government in terms of what the parties would have announced on Monday.
Let's talk about the West African countries now ending the presence of military forces in Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, Chad, Ivory Coast and Senegal.
Yes, it looks like the winds of change are blowing in West Africa. As you know, that there were coups because the nations were restless in that region. And now the new leaders, who mostly are generals, have decided to make certain changes. For example, as you pointed out, asking the foreign forces to leave. Mainly you'll have France and the United States of America. It happened with Niger, it happened with Mali, with Burkina Faso. We saw Chad just before elections, a candidate saying that must happen. And then we then saw Ivory Coast yesterday. For me, Ivory Coast was such a surprise because Ouattara is in power today because of the support of the French. We know the role played by the French in supporting Ouattara and even supporting him when there was violence in that country, and we saw the former leader being taken to The Hague. It was because of the support of the French, and now he has announced, because he wants to come back, he's supposed to leave office next elections. I think the people who want to get into power in West Africa, they saw this issue of expelling foreign forces working for other people who were leaders of the coup or who took power in that region. Now it's becoming a rallying point, or perhaps one can say, as we often say, it's the manifesto used in West Africa. So I'm shocked that Ouattara has taken this decision, not that there's something wrong, but looking at his history and his relationship with France. Now, this morning, it's Senegal also announcing that they will end the foreign military activities or presence in Senegal before end of the year. And these countries are all in West Africa. I still have to hear what ECOWAS is going to say and other countries, neighboring countries. When you look at other countries that still believe in France, who are part of West Africa, I think as this wind is blowing, they are also worried because we have many countries in that region who really depend so much on France. Even the milk or the tea comes from France, and sugar.
And as you say,
maybe let's take a listen at what Mbeki, the former president of South Africa, said about what was happening or what's happening in West Africa last year already in March. Let's take a listen.
The need to destroy and defeat neo-colonialism. And that's what the young soldiers are saying. What do we do with them? What does Africa do with them? I think Africa is and China is a problem. Answer to that issue. Answer to that question. That we have a French general based in Cote d'Ivoire who has actually the power to intervene in Cote d'Ivoire as line. So it's an anti-colonial rebellion. It has got this element of quite correct of removing elected presidents. How does it continent deal with that? Well, you know, OAU has a standard policy, as you mentioned, against illegal change of government.
You heard what the former president said. It was in March last year when he was saying perhaps the AU and ECOWAS must really look at why this is happening rather than perhaps taking a more hard line in terms of, as we know that the Constitutive Act of the AU says if your country is going a leadership change through coup or military means, you have to be suspended. Yes, that needs to be respected, the democracy, but what are the reasons that led or leading to this? Now, I think the leaders in West Africa are responding to that by taking decisions to ask the foreign forces to leave because it has been a thorny issue linked to colonialism and oppression.
All right, Sophie, certainly, you know, these stories do show that the world has got its work cut out for it. Thank you so much for your time. That's our international news editor, Sophie Mokoena.